Hi everyone, and welcome to my guide for the Lightning Spear Sorcerers in Season 5. This is most likely going to be my starter build for the season. It is a powerhouse of a new Sorc build thanks to the new Splintering Energy aspect that allows you to deal massive amounts of damage with Lightning Spears. As you can see here, there is like a 10 or more of them flying around at any moment thanks to spamming Spark with Unstable Currents, chance to cast twice for Lightning Spears, and of course our own Lightning Spear cooldown that casts 3 Lightning Spears at the same time when we press it. So overall, you just have a lot of these things floating around and decimating everything. And with the Splintering Energy aspect, they do a lot of damage and then chain to additional targets. So you actually have really good area clear, kind of moderate boss damage, but it is still fine. And as you can see here, I am cruising for those tier 100 pits, for example, and this is not an optimized build. So this can be a lot stronger, and it will be when the patch goes live. There were some fixes that probably help with the targeting of the Lightning Spears, which was kind of iffy on the PTR, at least on single targets, on the bosses. They were just kind of like flying off into nowhere. Seems like that has been addressed. That should also help with the single target damage here. And there is also some tech that we might be able to use now with the reworked Fractured Winter Glass to potentially make this like the most busted build of the entire season. But that remains to be seen, since Fractured Winter Glass has been updated and no one has been able to test how exactly it works. But this is a technology that Northvar told me about that might also make its way into the setup, potentially making it way better than expected by combining it with Frozen Orb. So I have a planner for you guys for just like the standard variant that I will be starting with, and then we'll see what happens with the Frozen Orbs. And this is definitely a really good farming build. Not the craziest for pushing, but again, pending the Frozen Orb tech, and we'll see what happens. But you can also see here the boss, for example, still dies in like a stagger or two. And again, this was like a fairly unoptimized setup. Most of my gear was like masterworking 4 and, you know, no greater affixes and these kind of things. Maybe not even like all the aspects maxed out. So this is kind of what you're looking at here. This will go way beyond T100 farming territory and certainly push also into probably 130, 40, maybe 150 plus. So let's go into the planner and I'll show you what it's all about. We will also have a max roll written guide by Northvar for this build, so you can also go check that out whenever it's ready. I'll also link that in the description. So this planner here has 2 variants. Here's the starter variant and then the Ubers variant, where we want to include a few items. Now there are a lot of really good unique items. This is not, you know, the gospel here. You can also, you know, switch some stuff up a little bit. We'll see how the meta evolves. A lot of items have become a lot more powerful in Season 5 on the unique side. But I put for the starter the Asus Heirloom that now gives you up to 40% crit chance. That is pretty good for this build because you want to hit 100%. Splintering Energy aspect needs you to crit. So you want to hit 100%, and Asus Heirloom brings you a good chunk of the way there basically. So this is why I want to use that, and we also want to put Splintering Energy here on the neck so we get the most out of the power, because this is basically the entire build, this aspect. So you want to have 100% crit chance and then also stack a lot of crit damage on top of it, because this also scales the Splintering Energy aspect. So Asus Heirloom, very powerful. Later on with more uniques, you can also fit in a Time Rusher ring that was also buffed now to give you 20% per stack, has a bunch more non-physical damage as well, very nice item. And then we have the Harlequin Crest that also got buffed to a lot more cooldown. You can hit over 50% cooldown reduction with this item alone, effectively just almost capping you out on your cooldown on everything. And this allows you to spam more Lightning Spears, press your Unstable Currents more often, and so on. So it's pretty wild. And the Tyrus Might, that is just like the craziest defensive item in the entire game now. These planner like tooltips right now are still the old versions, but the new versions are all of this but better basically. So keep that in mind. Once we do the switch to the PTR data, then all of the items will be updated. Right now in this video they are not. So either way, those items are extremely strong, but there could be other choices here that we could include. As I said, we talked about the Fractured Winter Glass that was updated. So that might be included here, and then you might have to put Splintering Energy either on a one-handed slot or maybe even go for a staff, so that you have the double power. This might actually be the way here. You just deal double damage with the power basically, and this is all of the damage. The Lightning Spear itself and the ranks to Lightning Spear, for example, don't actually really matter. We don't even invest more ranks into Lightning Spear. It's all about this aspect. So putting it on a staff is also an option once you have enough cooldown reduction. One important synergy for the build is also the unstable currents. We use unstable currents to try to cast as many lightning spears passively as we can, because every time you use a shock skill, you will cast another random lightning skill. So there's a 1 in 4 chance every time you use Spark to also cast a lightning spear. So as you saw in the footage at the start, I have a relatively long cooldown on lightning spear, but it doesn't really matter because you just spam Spark, and every time you do that, you have a 1 in 4 chance to get lightning spears. So this is kind of like how that combo works. Spark also has a bunch of other perks. It gives you, for example, the 8% crit chance. You see here the planner only goes to 52%. You're going to get 8 from this. It's going to be 60, and then we get 40 from Asus Heirloom, and boom, you're at 100. So 52% sheet crit is what you're trying to hit. And you see here, there's only 2 items that even have crit chance. You want to masterwork that up a little bit or so. You can also put Exile on the ring, so you can maybe try to make that work other ways early on. But try to invest into crit chance. And then in a late game, you don't need that many items with crit chance, thanks to Spark and Asus. And with enough cooldown reduction, our unstable currents can go down to as little as like 17.5 seconds base cooldown when you cap out, at least once you have the Harlequin Crest and really high cooldown reduction values on it. But even without that, we have the new Orange Herald aspect. So this is something that was introduced in Season 5 as well. It says it gives you a lucky hit chance to reduce your ultimate cooldown by 2 seconds. So you can just spam Spark to proc this, and your lightning spears, they will proc this, and even a teleport when you teleport into a pack. So this is just giving you all the cooldown you need, even if you don't have like 50% or something cooldown reduction. There is also the temper for this unstable currents cooldown reduction here. You can see this is a resource temper that can go on your jewelry. So you can also get 25% here, 20% there, and here's a Tarasha ring, okay? But in the starter version, for example, you can also put that. And this also brings you a good chunk of the way there to try to get the cooldown cap, get your unstable currents to, maybe 20 seconds or less baseline. And it lasts 10 seconds, and then the rest comes from Orange Herald. So you have permanent unstable currents. You spam the sparks, and whenever your lightning spear is ready, you press that. And then we also have the overwhelming currents aspect here, where you have a 40% chance every time you use a spark to get another cast that might also be a lightning spear. So you have tons of lightning spears floating around, and this is kind of like how the main combo works. The rest is just like teleporting around, pressing your ice armor, and then pressing your ice plates. That also gives you the cooldown reduction and gives you the cold damage effects, for example, later for the Tarasha or for the Elementalist Glyph. We also have, for example, here the Firebolt enchant to include the fire synergies, the burning synergies, Burning Instinct board for the damage reduction, and Devouring Blaze. You can also, for example, go for the Teleport enchant, either instead of Ice Blades or instead of Firebolt. Probably I would replace Ice Blades here if you want to go really fast for like, speed farming content. Teleport enchant is really good, and this is kind of how the setup works. The rest of the skill tree is, just kind of like, trying to add more to this whole combination. For example, we add charged bolts with the 25% damage reduction. Since we constantly cast random charged bolts from our unstable currents, we just have like a nice little damage reduction support tool here. We invest a bit into teleport to make it a shorter cooldown. We get the teleport damage reduction as well, and the movement speed here. In general, you have a lot of movement speed on this build, so you might be wondering, Asus Heirloom, we need to stack movement speed. Well, we have Conjuration Mastery. And since we have so many of those lightning spears out and also a bunch of ice blades, you will generally cap out on movement speed relatively quickly, especially once you get extra ranks to Conjuration Mastery, for example, on your neck. This is really powerful. Fractured Winter Glass also has Conjuration Mastery ranks, so instead of having a normal neck, you can also get it there if you do that build in the end, and you will be basically perma movement speed capped. You have tons of mana regen, you can't even spend mana really, and you also get extra damage here. So in general, this scales up to a lot of power, a lot of speed and utility. So very strong passive here. You want to invest into that as soon as you can. We have the ice armor here. So this just gives you defense, gives you the barrier to survive. And we also have, for example, here mystical ice armor to deal extra damage to frozen enemies. That's kind of cool. We go for Glass Cannon, very powerful passive. We have here the Ice Blade, so we want to get the cooldown reduction. So you just want to press the Ice Blades occasionally. That also gives you, for example, the protection proc here. Every time you use a cooldown, you get 30% of your life as barrier. So this kind of supplements the Ice Armor, so they have perma barrier cycling basically. You teleport, new Ice Blades, You press Unstable Current sometimes, you press the Lightning Spear sometimes. And each of those things will give you the protection for the barrier, and you try to cycle it roughly every 3 to 3.5 seconds so that you always have a barrier up. And when you take heavy damage, you can like piano all of your skills basically. Then we have the Lightning Spear, as I mentioned, only 1 rank because the damage comes from the aspect, not from the spear itself. We get an extra spear, and then we also have guaranteed stun when we crit, and since you always crit, that's very nice. You have a lot of crowd control, lots of stagger, everything is kind of safe, you know, because these lightning spears, they fly off to off screen and stun stuff anywhere. So it's a really good combo here, and you're actually gonna just kind of cruise through the pits and you're gonna be pretty safe. We have Icy Veil for the longer barriers, Devouring Blaze for the crit damage since we have 100% crit chance, and we have Hoardfrost here since we want to freeze enemies. We can do that with a temper, so you can like put freeze temper like this here, for example, on a glove or a chest or something like that. Get a bit of freeze, and also with the ice armor you chill enemies around you, and also when you stagger bosses you'll get this extra damage here against frozen enemies. And then lastly, Unstable Currents. We don't go for the last upgrade because we don't care that much about the crackling energy, and we just try to, you know, get the attack speed and get our free casts here. And then we have a few of these lightning passives. So there is a bit of crit chance, there's movement speed, and here is enemies deal less damage. And our core passive, Veer's Mastery. This has been updated. This is now basically 25% damage reduction and 25% extra damage done. On average, you have like a chance for like a really huge burst with this, and it will be permanently up with a shock build like this. Since we always attack every 5 seconds, and you know everything is shock skills, you have lightning spears floating around, they'll proc this for you, so you don't have to worry about this. Now, if you want to go real fast, you can also go for a bit of crackling energy and then take overflowing energy. So for example, you could take the last point here in Unstable Currents, and then you can maybe take 1 or 2 points in Static Discharge. In fact, in the Uber variant, I do have that. So they have a bit of crackle because we have an extra glyph there for the crackling energy that gives you the damage buff. So you want to have a little bit of crackle in that case. But if you go overflowing energy, you can like reduce your cooldowns really fast. So you, for example, don't need to go for the Orange Herald aspect, and you even get extra cooldown reduction for your Lightning Spear and for your teleport. So you do give up quite a lot of power from the Veer's Mastery, but especially if you want to like fly with teleport, then this might also be an option that you can go for. Now let's talk about some of the remaining aspects here in the starter variant before we have Ubers and lots of cooldown reduction and so on. I also found it quite helpful to run with the Hectic aspect. Since we are spamming Spark all the time, we actually proc this regularly, and then we have 2 cooldown reduction aspects here, the Orange Herald and Hectic, and that makes it actually pretty consistent to have perma Unstable Currents almost from the start, even with really crappy gear, even without the tempers and all that stuff. So this was really helpful. And it just made everything a lot more smooth. You have more casts, you have more teleports, and so on. So I really like that. And also here we can do concentration aspect, you can also do might aspect. Or if you feel like your cooldown is fine, you want to be more tanky, you can combine concentration and might aspect. So there are some options here just to be a bit more tanky early on as well, depending on what you want to do. And we also have a bunch of other like the offensive powers here that's conceded. I talked about cycling the barriers. This gives you extra damage here. Then we have the Storm Swell. We make stuff vulnerable kind of by default. This is part of Lightning Spear now. Critical strikes apply vulnerable, so everything will be vulnerable all the time. So you can go for the Storm Swell, we can go for the Shredding Blades. So both these are pretty powerful vulnerable damage buffs. You have the rapid aspect here early on. Later this is replaced with Tarasha. Just helps you with more hectic procs, helps you with more Unstable Current procs, and the spinning energy here on the neck. And this is the setup basically. Relatively straightforward with just a bunch of these typical offensive powers like Storm Swell and Conceded and so on. And then spinning energy, try to get a high roll of this as soon as possible. For your star priorities and your tempers. So you see here there is actually a temper for Lightning Spear cast twice. You want to put this on both of your weapons to get 100% chance. So every time you cast it, you get 2. In fact, on a hard cast, you get 3 because you have the enhanced Lightning Spear. It also gives you an additional 1. So you get 3 when you cast it, and you get 2 when you trigger it. So you get a lot of these Lightning Spears, a lot of Conservation Mastery procs. And then you want to get a lot of crit chance, a lot of crit damage. Everywhere you can, you temper crit damage. You see this here, crit damage here, here, all the offensive slots. You go crit damage. This scales the splintering energy aspect. And of course, just generally scales your damage. So it has like kind of like a double dipping effect. For your neck, you want to have something like this here. Devouring Blaze ranks, really powerful. Conjuration Mastery ranks, really powerful. Kind of hard to say which one of the two is better, depending on, I guess, if you want one-shot enemies and if you hit the movement speed cap or not. Technically, Conjuration Mastery gives you slightly less damage than the Devouring Blaze. But if you have a lot of these Lightning Spears up, then you might actually get more out of Conjuration Mastery. So it's very powerful. You want to try to stack this up. as much as possible. And for the rest of the gear, we try to max out our resistances, but it's pretty easy as a Sorc. Most of it comes from the Paragons anyway. We try to get a bit of armor, for example, here on the pants. Later, when you have mythic items, the updated Shaco also has a lot of armor that kind of solves all of your armor by itself. And then you have the Tyrus Might that solves all of your resistances by itself. So you don't have to worry about any of those. And the rest is just like stack some in, stack some life, stack some non-physical damage. For example, try to invest in that a little bit. For example, on a Tarasha ring. This is important for our Frigid Fate Paragon board. And yeah, the rest is like pretty straightforward, just like typical stats here. Now let's talk about the Paragon lastly. This looks like this. We have a 6-board setup here in the starter variant. And then for the Uber variant, I actually did a bit of a respec. We added a 7th board here and tried to like spread it a bit thinner. So there's not really a huge respec, as you can see here. We mostly just, unattach this board and then add another one in between before this one. So there's like a minor respec you have to do later. The reason for that is we can fit an extra glyph and we kind of take out a bunch of like random points that previously gave us, for example, res here. So this is something we have in a starter variant just to cap out on the res more easily. But as I mentioned, the updated Tyrus Might, it has ridiculous amounts of all res. So you don't need this kind of stuff. So there are some small tweaks here. In some places, we move around a few glyphs as well, and then you have this Uber variant here. So it's like a minor respec, but it makes your build more powerful once you have those items. But in general, we have some important legendary Paragon nodes. Here we have the Frigid Fate that is actually getting buffed to, I think, double the values. So it's going to be pretty powerful with Frigid Fate. We have the Elemental Summoner. So we get extra cooldown reduction for our Lightning Spear, for example, and also for our Ice Blades, so that's kind of nice to just have. We don't really care much about the damage, as I mentioned. This doesn't actually benefit the splintering energy aspect, but we pick it up anyway. It's just a few points while we're on the board anyway. There's like, a glyph slot here, and there's like some life there, so you kind of just pass through that. It's a few points, you pick it for the cooldown. And then the rest of this Paragon board is mostly just stacking glyphs, stacking life, and some damage reduction. So we start here with the Limitless glyph. We have all 3 elements, so this gives you a 15% damage buff. We have the Enchanter glyph that gives us a lot of the non-physical that we need to stack up the Frigid Fate board, for example, and also gives us a bit of extra maximum res, which is nice. We have the Conjurer glyph. Conjurations have 20% increased duration, so the lightning spears just float around for longer. Very nice. We have the Destruction glyph here, lots of crit damage, and then a stacking crit buff. So this obviously synergizes with our splintering energy. We have Tactician here. This gives us extra damage and also buffs the powerful rare nodes here on the Burning Instinct board for the damage reduction. So you're going to be pretty defensive on this build. In addition to all the crowd control that you have, you also have this here. And lastly, we have Flame Feeder, extra damage against burning enemies that we apply easily with Firebolt. So this is what the Paragon board looks like. And in the Uber variant, we also add the Charged glyph here. So every time you pick up Crackling Energy, you get a damage buff up to 15% for 5 seconds. And this is what I mentioned earlier. You want to have this 1 point here in Static Discharge just to get a bit of crackle here and there. And that is enough to just spawn a crackle and get this buff basically. So this is why we picked it up later. So this is the setup that I'm planning to go with for the start. We will see what happens with the Fractured Winterglass. So again, keep this kind of in the back of your head for the season start. Maybe we're gonna update the build, or maybe this is really gonna pop off hard and then this is gonna be the setup. In order to play Lightning Spear most effectively, you're actually going to spam a bunch of Frozen Orbs because they got a new effect where it can reduce your Conjuration cooldowns directly from Frozen Orb explosions. So this is pretty good, and this might be potentially insane for Lightning Spears, where you can just like spam Lightning Spears all the time basically. So stay tuned for that. I'll keep you guys updated in case that actually becomes the meta, but for now this is what I intend to go with. Of course, some stuff here is untested. We'll have to see what actually happens, and I will probably have some updated video once the season is live, once I have actually played this. Since this is most likely going to be my starter build and I might be starting as a Sorc, then I will be experimenting with this right away. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this guide here. So this is the Lightning Spear Sorc. I'm very excited for this one. Hope you are too. Hope you liked this video. I wish you good luck in season 5 and see you guys next time.